Lovely. So the last panel before we go into lunch is all around how Web3 foundations can be supporting research efforts. So on the panel, it's moved around a little bit. We are meant to have different folks, but I love how it's quite fluid and we can fill in different sort of folks. So maybe we can start off with some introductions and then I'll give some context on who's sitting in on the panel. Over to you guys.
Hey, hi, I'm Bhargav from Web3 Foundation. I'm part of the research team there. Our flagship project is Polkadot, but we are also working a lot on fundamental research in blockchain. And we have quite a strong research team working on all aspects from distributed systems to cryptography to economics and even social choice theory.
Hey everybody, I'm Lane. I work at the Near Foundation. Actually joined pretty recently. I was at the Ethereum Foundation from 2017 to 2019, so I can speak a little bit to some of the EF stuff, although it's been many, many years. So I've been doing blockchain R&D for 7 going on 8 years. I've touched many of the areas that you just mentioned over that time, including kind of low-level protocol design, core development, consensus mechanisms, up to kind of the more social layers of the stack. So I'm actually very focused right now on governance specifically. So I've done a lot of governance research and development as well. And yeah, Near Foundation is a large foundation. It's been around for a while and is very focused on, on AI right now. Kind of everything Near is kind of moving in the direction of AI, building out AI infrastructure. But yeah, I mean, again, also all the things you mentioned, cryptography, consensus mechanisms, just blockchain design more generally.
Hi, my name is John Fletcher. I'm from the TIG Foundation. TIG is the innovation game. I'm not on this lineup here, but I was switched from another panel, so I'm very glad to be here. The innovation game provides incentives for people to develop more performant algorithms for science, technology, and AI. It's quite low-level stuff, so think Fourier transform more than fine-tuning a neural network. But these things, of course, are very important for AI. Things like optimizers and and so on and so forth, backpropagation, more kind of human interpretable algorithms. And our objective is really not only to sort of drive progress and speed that up, but crucially keep the state-of-the-art algorithms open, which is important for sort of geopolitical stability, I think, if nothing else.
Brilliant, lovely. Thank you very much for your introductions there. So my first question is, all these 3 foundations and the institutions that you are running have deeply technical sort of roots. How do you balance maybe not yourself, how do you balance it, but what is the internal perception on spending more on the research and the development versus everyone's trying to find their go-to-market applications at the moment? What does it look like internally within your foundations?
Yeah, I mean, so the field is really rich and interesting problems, right? So most of the things that we are working at Web3 Foundation right now is inspired by problems that we face in designing our product Polkadot. And we have a lot of, there's a strong feedback mechanism from the engineers who are building things and hit a wall and then get back to us saying, hey, how can we improve this? How can we scale this? How can we make this more secure? And so in that sense, yeah, it's really about this feedback loop. And of course, we work on fundamental problems. The main idea is to make the blockchain more secure, more interoperable, more scalable. But if there's a really interesting paper that is out there, then that would be a nice cherry on the cake kind of a situation.
I think every foundation is really different, and I think it's I've been familiar with the Web3 Foundation since way, way, way back, and I think it's really awesome that there are foundations that are very deeply focused on tech, like the Web3 Foundation. I've read a lot of the papers, you said the papers are the cherry on the cake. I've learned a lot actually from the research that output from foundations like the Web3 Foundation. So I actually think it's a really fundamental public good. Near Foundation historically did some of the D in R&D, right? So more of the kind of development work, less of the research. And so before I joined, the decision was made to kind of pull back a bit on the development work. Ilya, our founder, really, I think, put it well when he said that like foundations don't tend to make good product organizations, and the reason is because for anyone who's ever been on a product team or been a product founder before, you know that like in order to do a product well, you have to say no a lot, right? You have to say no to a lot of different features and requests and things like this. Whereas actually fundamentally the role of a foundation is to say yes to a lot of people and a lot of things, right? You want to like support many different initiatives, many people, many social gatherings, events like this, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a bit of a tension there, I think. And again, every foundation's a bit different, but this is kind of the approach that Near has taken. And yeah, on the research side, as far as I know, I'm the first researcher ever to join the Near Foundation. So I think we're kind of hopefully moving in the direction of doing some of the sort of work that you guys have been doing. But I just think of it as a public good, for the reasons I just said, which is that this is all open source. We're working in public. We're putting it out there. Hopefully all the teams and projects in the ecosystem, in our own Near ecosystem, and the broader kind of Ethereum Big 10 ecosystem can benefit from it. And I do think the role of a foundation is like to invest in the public good. So that's my take.
Yeah. I'm going to come from a slightly historical direction on this. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever heard of a guy called Eric Raymond. He was a sort of like a legend of open source, old school. He co-founded the OSI with his partner. He had some amazing sort of insights. Back in the day, right at the beginning of open source. Actually, he wrote several famous essays. One probably most famous was The Cathedral and the Bazaar. But there's another extremely interesting one on the economics of open source called The Magic Cauldron. And what he talks about is he saw even then that open source as a phenomenon as it is, in fact, is quite narrow in the way that it works. In fact, it only really works well. I mean, you can open source anything, but the really successful projects that really get going, it can't really be anything that requires significant cash flows. So this is sort of that Linux was a sort of very large code base, and it was highly modular. People could contribute meaningfully on a voluntary basis. So they didn't have to do it full time, so they didn't need money. They could do it for the love of it. For some things, you can't do that. Science is an example. You can't really be competitive as a part-timer these days. It used to be was the time that you could be, but now you can't. And he identified something very interesting. So open source doesn't have a problem with value capture per se. A lot of people think that it does, but there was something called dual licensing, in fact, invented back in the day, which wasn't successful, but it did enable value capture. And everything was open source because it was all available under a copyleft license, but it was also available under a commercial paid license, which exempted you from the copyleft condition, which was very attractive to a lot of commercial people. So what happened is that the open source foundations did get revenue. They could do some good things, such as pay full-time staff maintainers. They could pay some people who were full-time to contribute to the project. But of course, the real power for open source is not the people who work for the foundation. It's the open contributions that are crowdsourced in a permissionless way. And there was no way to remunerate those guys on a systematic basis. You cannot price the code contributions in general. It's not known. He conjectured that you needed a market mechanism, and this is a formidable problem still outstanding to this day. What TIG has done, we believe, and we'd love some critique on this, is solve a very special case of that problem, where these open source contributions are algorithms. You can price them by racing them, essentially. People in TIG perform proof of work using the algorithms, just solving synthetic versions of real-life problems over and over and again, and they, as miners, produce a sort of synthetic source of demand for these things, and you just look at what algorithm's most adopted, and you remunerate that one. So the market figures it out. Not the market for the algorithms, but the market for proof of work. But it's designed by design, it is the same, they are coincident. So this is just a long way of saying that we try very hard to find a market mechanism in order to fund the research, because it's sort of more efficient. Everybody knows, the Soviet Union didn't work very well because there was committees of people sitting around figuring out who should get what money. That's not very efficient. But the reason why they do that a lot of time in software development and in science is because there's simply no other way. It's not because they're communists, it's because there's no other way being figured out. So we're very excited at looking at these kinds of mechanisms. If you can do it for algorithms, that's far from a general type of code, but maybe you can do it for other things too.
I don't want to derail the conversation, but I'm curious your thoughts on DeSci, because that's a new approach to solving exactly the problem you're talking about. Do you think it has legs?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think our protocol fits into DeSci better than others. In fact, if anybody writes the history of this, I gave a talk actually on our protocol, what became our protocol in 2014, called "Incentivizing Science with Cryptoeconomics" at the Hauser Forum in Cambridge. So I think, maybe I was one of the first. So it does have legs, but a lot of it is nonsense. So it's like, but you've got to have a market mechanism for tight feedback loop. Otherwise, you simply say something that sounds good. It's like the reason why they brought in securities laws in the beginning, because it's easy to sell stuff to people who don't know anything. I get you, but so it can work, but You got to be careful.
I want to double down on this point you sort of mentioned, the public goods. A lot of this research is open source. Unfortunately, what I kind of see is with a lot of the protocols and the foundations behind them, they really narrow in and silo in on certain problems and not necessarily a lot of collaboration taking place. How do you think foundations can approach the collaborative nature of open source and reach out to other foundations? Do you think it's possible? And if there are initiatives happening, whether at a research level, where are you engaging other researchers from other protocols, or at a strategic level where you're like, okay, let's kind of solve these industry problems together? If so, how is that being done? And if not, why not?
Historically, we've been really bad at this in general. I mean, I'm sure there's exceptions. When I was at the Ethereum Foundation, I was part of a team called EWASM. EWASM stands for Ethereum WebAssembly. So we were building like a next generation virtual machine to replace EVM built on WebAssembly. We didn't invent WebAssembly, obviously, right? WebAssembly is a global standard technology that came out of the Web2 space, adopted, supported by many large companies, et cetera, well governed. And we weren't the only team working on WebAssembly, right? WebAssembly has since appeared in, Polkadot obviously uses WebAssembly. That's one of the best examples. Arbitrum, many other projects. And so we actually had an initiative in 2018, if I remember correctly. I think it was called like WASM for the blockchain or WASM on the blockchain or something, where we got researchers and builders from 10 or 12 organizations, including Polkadot. We were working with some amazing Polkadot developers together in Berlin, and we did like a whole week-long gathering. Great knowledge sharing came out of it. So, this is a counterexample, right? It can work. I've been working in RISC-V recently, which is another global standard, another VM, kind of an alternative to WebAssembly, and I know there's some effort on the part of the Ethereum Foundation right now to do things like formal verification of ZK, ZK VMs in general, and like a RISC-V ZK VM. So it's the projects like that Succinct Labs and RISC-0 are working on, for example. So these things do happen. They should happen more often. That's my initial thought.
Yeah, so at the Web3 Foundation, we have collaborated quite a bit with like academic groups. So since the problems are so interdisciplinary in nature in the blockchain space, we don't have like the expertise in looking at it from all angles, right? So that's where we reach out to researchers, mostly from academia, who have the right background and can like collaborate with us and kind of like give the right shape to the problem before we tackle it. But in general, like I feel like this works only when you have like a very clear understanding of what the project is going to be. If you just want to like collaborate on a very broad topic, it doesn't end up so well. This might be a controversial take, but like if you have like a predetermined like narrow scope, then the results are much better.
Yeah, so actually, WebAssembly and RISC-V are great examples of this because they're super well defined. Yeah, what do you think?
I think these sort of topics are somewhat distinct. Like collaborating with other foundations and the creation of public goods are sort of two kind of sort of fascinating topics in and of themselves. Public goods are very fascinating. You talk about open source. I think that open source was the first example of a public good that ran without any government subsidy. It didn't require any and it was sort of kind of sustainable in so it's basically the first privately produced public good. And my understanding is that a lot of economists thought that wasn't the thing. It wasn't even possible before, but open source. So if you wonder, that's possible, what else is possible? As I mentioned before, open source doesn't necessarily mean that you can't capture value. It doesn't necessarily mean, evidently, that you can't even distribute the value back to the people who create it in sort of in a way which is perceived as fair and therefore doesn't cause some kind of discord within the community. The community is incredibly important in open source, so that's one of the reasons if that sort of melts down and there's some perception of unfairness, that's one of the things that can cause it not to work. Another amazing thing about open source and public goods in general, they don't have to be free. In fact, it's I think the definition of a public good is it should be non-rivalrous and non-excludable. But non-excludable means that you should not be excluded on the basis of inability to pay. So if there is a fee, but it's scaled to your ability to pay, and you have no money, then you don't pay anything. Then it still qualifies as a public good. Public parks are like that, actually, because if you don't pay your taxes, you don't get to use them because they send you to jail. But in terms of, sorry, I'm rambling slightly here. But in terms of we are very enthusiastic about this. We're collaborating with Jensen, in talks to have collaborations with also Prime Intellect and a company called Apta, which is based in Cambridge, and they sort of share our vision of. It doesn't mean to say you can't make money if you're producing open source, and I think that in fact is the future. We have to figure out using crypto how you can make masses of money, more money than anybody's ever made in their life, by generating and producing open public goods. It's possible.
Amazing, I love that. My final question, just wrapping up, is I guess it's an open platform to you guys. Just mention what sort of initiatives you have in terms of how community members, researchers can get in touch. What are some of the high-level things that you're working on at the moment? And yeah, those 2 points will be fantastic.
Yeah. So Web3 Foundation has a very active grants program where we support builders and researchers working on open source like code and research in general. So if you are interested, you can check out the grants program of the foundation. And we are also looking into starting an initiative for working with students from universities, because we feel we have a lot of interesting problems, and students who want to work on challenging problems might have a right fit where we can kind of define the problem and guide them and have some interesting results coming out of that.
Exciting. Yeah, so I'm personally right now very focused on governance, as I mentioned a little while ago. I am designing, or I should say working with people smarter than me who are designing and then building a new governance system for the entire Near organization, Near protocol, et cetera. So if anyone out there is interested in governance, please come talk to me. We also have grants available for sure. I'm hiring as well. Need to add some people to the team. And then Near Foundation more broadly is definitely excited to support anyone who's interested in doing R&D in the space. I think an important thing to note about Near and Near Foundation is we're focused on base layer, how do I put it, generally applicable technologies. So things like intents, we have an intents engine, and this thing called chain signatures, chain abstraction, right? Which means that you can build things using Near tools that actually allow you to move assets across all different chains, all other ecosystems, et cetera. So we're thinking, very kind of big picture. So, come work with us to build things that touch Bitcoin and Dogecoin and Ethereum and Polkadot and really all the other projects out there, Solana, et cetera. I'm L Rettig on Twitter, so that's my first initial, last name, LRETTIG. My DMs are open, so feel free to reach out there, and I'd love to keep in touch.
We hope to have a grants program. So we're still quite new. We've only really been sort of publicly, actively bringing people to the project for about 6 months. We have sort of various bounties for things that we want to do, but a grants program is something that is in the works. We are doing some, some collaborations which are also mentioned, but we're open to sort of ideas, especially for different challenges, new challenges to put in the innovation game. And really, anybody who's interested in this sort of automated algorithm developer thing, any compute that anybody wants to donate for the purposes of fine tuning, that's also very welcome. And check us out at tig.foundation, TIG.foundation, if you're interested.
Lovely, thank you very much to our panelists, and we're going to break now for lunch, and we'll be convening again at 2:15. Now